Triple M Studios and Mystery Murder and Magic proudly present Midweek Minis. And here's your host, Andrea Lee.
Quentin Jeter, James Parham, Quentin Jeter, Drayshawn Smith, Michael Land, Christopher Reinhardt, Curtis Bomar, Jabri Brandon, Jessica Ashmore, Kevin Ammons, Kenneth Thorell, and Hayley Thomason are names you may not be familiar with, but to their families they are much more than just names. They're family members who met their deaths at the hands of an unknown person or persons. Quentin, James, Tyvin, Drayshawn, Michael, Curtis, and Jabri were all found shot to death. But Christopher, Jessica, Kenneth, Kevin, and Hayley, all of their deaths are under suspicious circumstances, but police working the cases haven't released details on how they died. Quentin Jeter was only 18 when he was killed by gunfire at the end of November in 2007. It's been almost 14 years and his family still has no answers. No one called 911 that night, but gunfire was heard in the area. Later that night, a report of a body laying in a yard came in, and shell casings for a 22 gauge and a 9mm handgun was found in the area, and it is believed he was the victim of a gun battle. On the night of August 26, 2018, James Parham, who was 55 years old, was found unresponsive at the bottom of his front steps. Witnesses say they heard gunshots and saw two men running from the area. One of the men was wearing a red shirt, and both of them are believed to be between 19 and 25 years old. 40-year-old Quentin Jeter's body was found by police officers in the parking lot of a local restaurant on December 30th, 2019. An arrest was made, but the charges were later dropped because, according to video evidence that they obtained from a store across the street from the restaurant, 9 people were seen going behind the restaurant, and one of them had told police that the man they had arrested had been the one to kill Mr. Jeter. But he later changed his mind and decided to not continue and help him with the case, so they dropped the charges. I guess a lack of evidence. On June the 10th, 2020, officers responded to a call about gunfire, and when they arrived, they found the body of 26-year-old Drayshawn Smith laying face down on the ground. No suspects have been named in his murder. 36-year-old Michael Land was known for the annual school supply drive that he held every year, and they say that it wasn't just to go get school supplies. The kids were really excited because he had like bouncy houses and all kind of inflatable stuff. It was like a little festival, and there was also the school supplies. But his life was cut short. Officers were dispatched on December 18th, 2020 to a report of a deceased body on the lawn of his home. That deceased person was Michael Land. Christopher Reinhardt was only 28 when he was shot to death on April 16, 2015. Like many of the other victims, he was found lying in the yard of his own home when officers responded to a shots fired call. No motive or suspects have been identified in this case. 21-year-old Christopher Bomar and 17-year-old Jabri Brandon were shot while attending a party that witnesses say there was nearly 1,000 people in attendance. Now, from what I read, this was like a block party that several families on this road had every year. When the gunfire rang out, people started running away from the scene. This took place on May 23rd, 2020. Shots were fired around 10:30 p.m. that night and lasted for several moments. And as a matter of fact, when police arrived on the scene, gunfire was still taking place. If anyone knows who fired the shots or why, they're not saying. Now, 2 men were arrested in this case, but it's still listed as a cold case, and I'm unable to locate any information on charges being dropped against the two men. Jessica Ashmore was last seen around noon on May 19th, 2019. She was the 34-year-old mother of two little kids. The day that she was last seen, she and her half-brother had a disagreement, and she walked away from the area. She didn't take her phone or any money with her. Her mom says that they thought that she was just going for a walk and she would come back home, but she never returned. On May 25th, she was reported missing. For months, law enforcement used every resource they could to search for her. They used drones, people on feet, whatever they searched for her. Unfortunately, on December 16, 2019, skeletal remains that were later identified as Jessica's were found in a wooded area. The investigators, are calling the death criminally suspicious. Kevin Ammons disappeared on January 19th, 2020 after borrowing a phone at a convenience store to call his mom, Veronica. He wanted her to come pick him up. Then he said he was robbed, and after that, the line went dead. Veronica reported him missing that very day. They searched for him for nearly a month, and finally, they were able to locate his body in a ravine behind a church. Kevin was only 30 years old, and he was the father, and they say a very good father. And I actually know this family. I went to school with his mom, Veronica, and I have a daughter that's around his age who was friends with his brother, and they're just good people. Stuff like this shouldn't happen to anybody, but from the stories I've read about all of these victims, they were all decent human beings. I mean, I'm sure, like anybody else, they had their problems, but I mean, nobody deserves what happened to any of these people. Now, like I said, Kevin was only 30. Now, no details on the cause of his death has been released that I could find, but SLED and local law authorities continue to investigate. 38-year-old Kenneth Thorell was found deceased with a single gunshot wound to the head. He was found on the road in front of an abandoned house on September 14th, 2016. Like the others, his death was ruled as a homicide, but no suspects have been named. And then finally, there's Hayley Thomason. Her body was found at the bottom of the stairs in her home. Her family does not believe that it was an accident, and there's a lot of unknowns in this case. A year after her death, there's still no answers to give her family closure. Hayley was 26 when she died on February 9th, 2020. Now, my point of this episode is not to bring sadness, but to bring awareness. Somewhere, someone knows something about all of these unsolved cases. I mean, they might not know about every one, but they know something about one of them. They have to. And I can't even imagine the guilt that I myself would feel if I knew something that could bring one of these families some closure. That not knowing what happened or who's to blame, it's got to leave like a wound that's just like wide open on your heart. That not knowing is got to be one of the worst feelings. Now, many of these victims were parents. They were all somebody's son or daughter. Even if you think what you know about one of these cases isn't important, it very well could be. No information is like too little. Now, if you know anything at all, I urge you to give the Union County Crime Stoppers a call. That phone number is 864-427-0800.